Okay, should work. Bong.
Look at that, right on cue.
Lovely.
Yeah, it looks pretty decent.
I'm just wondering what other things one could do with the extra camera. Like different scenes. Would it be good to have a different scene and then cut to this one?
I think I'm not showing a video on here.
No one needs to see what's happening in the room, do they?
Not much does happen in the room, does it?
No, exactly. But I think there's a thing about setting a context that is, I don't know, meaningful on some level. Are we on?
Oh, it says that they're all offline. Although it was streaming.
What the image
Stream
was,
isn't.
the image was showing up, I take it.
I'll just double check around here that it hasn't stopped. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
But all on Restream, it's saying that it's offline.
Oh. Oh, what? But is it coming through on YouTube? And stuff?
Yeah.
Oh well.
Anybody knows. The dulcet tones of clearing off a palette.
Yes. So yeah, well, if we're live, then hello to anyone who's raced in right at the beginning.
Josie's already on board.
Hey. I keep seeing bits of paint and thinking, oh, I could probably keep that and use it, and then it's all dried, and then it will just, the flakes will find their way into the wet paint. So all that can go. Where's my box? It's over here. Okay.
It's kind of a shame because I can't really sort of monitor all the chat that's coming in. Never mind.
Oh, it's not showing.
No, it's not showing the image here or the chat on Restream. It's saying that they're offline, but
have you done a refresh?
That's a good shout. Let's do a refresh, see what happens there. Oh, there we go. As simple as that.
Yeah. There we are.
Ta-da!
We can now see your comments and suggestions.
Yeah, the hordes of comments that come in.
It's surprising how many we get, actually.
Yeah, it's good. It's fun.
Right. Okay, that's a clean palette.
Yeah.
So I have here A small square canvas as well. Panel. It's panel. It's not canvas. Sorry. Correct myself. And some sugar cubes and a lemon. I'm going to rearrange these slightly. Put that there in a way that's interesting. It's like a little sugar cube henge. Put it on that, turn it a bit, back a bit. And move the light back a little bit. Yeah, that's pretty good. And that's how I'm going to start off. Oh look, more junk. So try and get all of the things that lump making bits of paint off the palette, ready to start. Now, I've got a warm light as a sort of accent light. Yeah, some little adjustments to make just to get things so they sit comfortably. That does fit quite nicely in a square. Probably not going to pay. Am I going to pay much attention to the bowl? Probably not much. So yeah, I think I might go with some warm colour for the drawing stage. I'm going to want a bit of raw umber. An amount of yellow. So it'd probably be good to sort of wait a while before I put yellow back on the palette. Save it up. That'll do. So let's have a bit of that raw umber over here. That's a lump. Get off. Bit of thinners. Not loads. Okay, and then that's the direction of my sugar cubes. That's the direction of my lemon and its shadow underneath. There's a few shadow shapes there and here. There's a bit of a shadow shape of some cubes there and here. And a bit here. And a bit there. Bowl will sort of stick up at the back. It's not that visible. That's interesting enough. A few reflections and bits and pieces. I'll pop a bit of blue in now. Just for those extra dark bits. Where's that going to go? Maybe a bit here. Maybe a bit there. bit under here. That's closer than I thought.
So what's your focal point on this then?
I don't know yet. I'm just sort of trying placing things. I was thinking about the lemon being in a comfortable place and the sugar cubes being in a comfortable place, and this looks pretty good where it is. I'm already sort of, even though it's just the drawing stage, I'm sort of hinting at some of these colours already, just so I can get a few things in place. There's a few shadow shapes there. There's a few, they're going to get more orange. A few shadow shapes over here. And then they'll carry on. What's this doing? Same again. And then in the reflections as well. There, get some of these negative spaces around. I'm already spending way too much time drawing sugar cubes, but I think I've got something to go on now. It gets even paler in there. Yeah, feeling probably, if I know this feeling, I'm overconfident. I'm thinking, yeah, I got this is going to be easy. Which means there's a horrible surprise coming somewhere. But who knows where?
When you paint and you're not doing the live stream,
Yeah.
do you have music in the background?
I've taken to listening to audiobooks recently.
Okay.
Only very recently. Steve suggested I try Spotify. And as you know, Graham, a lot of people have sort of incorporated Spotify into just the way they live their lives and, you know, create background music for themselves and all the rest of it. And I've never really taken to it. If I put a record on, it sort of needs to be deliberate. And it's a weird thing because, you know, audiobooks, there's definitely something different about listening to a book than reading a book. It's a different experience, and they're not the same. I know some people are very snobbish about audiobooks and think that reading it is superior to listening to it. And there's definitely something different. I don't think they could listen to the book and get the same experience. Whether it's superior or not is a whole different matter. But
I struggle with audiobooks and with podcasts.
okay, do you know why that is? Is it
When I am reading,
yeah.
that's my entire purpose. When I'm listening to an audiobook, my mind wanders
Right.
because I've not got something physical in front of me to focus on.
Maybe there's something about painting that allows an audiobook to do its thing. Because it's not like I can be distracted by anything else. So, you know, do you reckon you could listen to an audiobook if you had some, you know, if you were peeling potatoes?
Probably.
You had sacks and sacks of potatoes to peel, and that's what you're doing with your hands, and you can't be distracted by anything else. So yeah, it gives that bit of your brain something to do, but it's entirely separate to the thinking. Whoa. The pixels have left me some Michael Harding cadmium yellow.
But I also struggle if struggle is probably the wrong word. No, it's not actually. I'll get what I'm trying to say out in a minute. I find silence quite uncomfortable.
Is it because the existential horror comes crashing down on you?
Yeah, it's the demon that's always whispering in my ear actually gets a voice.
Yeah, I know a few people like that. It's very familiar.
But like, so we're sitting here, and every time that I do the Monday live stream, I have one of my AirPods in.
I noticed.
AirPods.
Yeah.
And it's just very gently and very like in the background, but I need it.
Yeah, I think there's there's something to be said for just sort of facing the silence, the emptiness, and just being present in something and not having to distract yourself or be entertained in some way or any of those sorts of things. But that's not to say I wouldn't criticize that. It's it requires a certain amount of effort. And if my brain is like a radio with terrible programming.
Oh, go on.
Well, there's always something going round on it by itself. I mean, everybody knows that feeling. Like if if you had a disagreement with someone and you're thinking, oh, I should have said this. That's because that conversation is still playing in your head, right? And as long as there's people to talk to, you won't run out of conversations. But they could all be in your head. And that's what my head's like. And a lot of the time when I'm talking, and you know how I can talk, I'm really just thinking out loud. I'm discussing something with myself. Half the time I don't even agree with myself. It's quite odd. But there is this thing of like, if left to its own devices, that will chatter. And there's a different thing to being okay with that and actually finding somewhere peaceful where that isn't happening, and that takes effort. It takes effort to not have that chatter in your head, I think. This is interesting. I'm playing with my mixing here. I'm not making a decision. I'm moving this blue around, and some interesting things are happening. I'm gonna get some of this alizarin out. I'm gonna put a little bit of mixing white in it. Oh, there's a lump which I don't want. I'll be using little bits of this colour as I go along. It's going to hint at other things. I'll mix an even paler one here. This is going to sneak into other colours on the way, but in the meantime, and I'm going to use some to make a kind of a grey as well. So let's have some viridian too. They make this rather interesting purpley colour, but you need the right balance. So that's mostly green at the moment. So put some more red in it. Yeah, a bit more purpley now. Still slightly on the green side.
When you paint then, is there like an internal narrative that's going on?
Yes, but it's somewhere separate to the thing that has internal conversations. It's separate to that. I think it's the same bit of your brain. If you'd been listening to the radio, you could almost carry on a conversation in your head. Mm-hmm. If there'd been some report on something or some people discussing something, you could sort of switch off the radio and be a guest panelist or something, and figure out what you would say if it were up to you, what you think. With painting, it's more like a machine's broken and you've got to fix it. And then you've stopped thinking in words. Do you know what I mean? You go into a different mode. It's got more in common with like getting a chain back on a bicycle. Does that make sense?
Sort of, yeah.
What part of your internal mind would be having a conversation with yourself or have any use of words if you were tasked with getting the chain back on a bicycle?
But is that just where you think that you're at a stage as an artist where there's an autopilot?
No, I think it always works like that. I think if you try to, actually, I can't speak for other people, but I do know that the more capable people are with conventional communication in words, the more of an obstacle that becomes to them dealing with direct experience. That everything gets turned into really convenient and effective shortcuts. If I had to paint you a shopping list, it would take me a long time, because it would have to be pictures of the things. You'd have to be able to tell which kind of apples they are. But you'd come back with much more of what I wanted than if I just wrote down apples. Because you look at the picture and you go, no, that's a gala.
That's a Granny Smith.
It's a gala or a pink lady. I can't decide which. I think it's a gala because it's slightly smaller. And then that's the apples you'd get. If you wrote apples, you could come back with anything. And so words are limited like that, but they're also much, much quicker. And people who are very effective at administrative tasks often find that effectiveness takes charge and does a perfectly good job before the slow, laborious trying to figure out how to get the chain back on the bicycle thing. It gets a chance to even get going. One of the exercises I used to do in drawing classes was to do a picture of your watch. And if you didn't have a watch, just the clock on the wall, which had a normal face and hands and stuff like that. And you can draw one of those very quickly. You can draw a circle. You can draw 2 lines on it that represent the hands, a long one and a short one. There's a shorthand for all of it because we learned it when we were kids. I don't know if they still teach kids that, but I can remember being, there were, pages with blank clock faces on them, and we had to fill them in to say which was 2:30 or whatever it was. And that's how you learn to read a clock. And then it's probably not really very relevant anymore. But and then people will write numbers around the outside in their own handwriting, because each of those things has got a shortcut. You know how to draw a circle, you know where to put the hands, you know how to write numbers. None of those things require observing of the actual clock face. So in a sense, they make all clock faces their clock face. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And to actually draw what that watch looks like, how those numbers on and those hands and stuff actually appear to you, is that's really difficult. And so, why would you do it the slow, laborious way? Because actually that's not a perfectly round circle. It's slightly at an angle, so it's an ellipse, and also you're looking up, and you can't see that one hand because there's a reflection halfway through it, and these numbers are sort of squashed up, so that's just a blob. And you can sort of see the curve on that one, but not the bottom bit of it. And so that's a different shaped blob. But you've got to, all the time, your other brain is going, I know how to do this. Get out of my way. I can write numbers perfectly well, thank you very much. And so you end up with an idea of what the clock face is doing rather than finding out what it actually looks like. And I think I have a bit of almost a sort of a disability with that conventional thinking. I'm genuinely bad at it. I'm very slow at doing anything that other people would do routinely, and it's incredibly frustrating to other people. I remember being told off because it took me too long to get dressed after games at school. And they thought I was winding them up, or I was just being, there's some kind of flaw in my character or whatever. But I can't just throw my socks on. Each sock requires consideration. Every foot is a new foot. Every sock is a new sock. You can't just do the same thing every time. So I can either do that or just sort of shove them somewhere near my feet and hope that'll do. And I don't really have this sort of habit. I have it in certain things, like the way I tie my laces is a routine. It's a learned thing. Oh, that's too dark. Maybe that'll go up here. I'm finding out where a few of these colours go now. I'm just chucking a few bits in. This is a bit of testing. Does that go darker there? It does. I'll lighten it again. A bit bluer, a bit too blue there. This is going to be a really tricky colour to get. But it's for getting something down in the meantime, especially seeing the big shapes. This will do. There's some lighter stuff over here. Darker behind it. I don't quite know what's going on there. Yeah, so the act of painting is sort of, I'm already pre-equipped for it by the fact that I can't answer any of these questions quickly. You have to take my time. And I think there's something to be said for it. I think a lot of the time we don't really think about, if a machine breaks, you can't just do the same thing you did every time. Sometimes there's a knack to how you whack something to make it work again, but most of the time you've got to take it apart and be slow and consider it. Think about it, think about how it works, how it wants to function. And then, take that time to understand it. You can't fix a toaster in the same way you put on your shoelaces. Unless it was the same every single time. Yeah. So now these blues are in, I can see places where they go a bit pinker, so I'm just going to chuck some of those pinks in where required, like underneath the reflection of this lemon. Probably the reflections of some of these sugar cubes. Same blue, just borrowed a bit of that pink in it as well. Shifts it. There we go. A darker version over here. That definitely goes in there.
So in terms of when you light a subject like this,
Oh, there we go.
or like the subject,
Yeah.
so you've got two lights. One is white and one is pink. Obviously it's sort of like an accent light that's going on to make things a little bit more
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
The white you warmed up a little bit, didn't you?
Yeah, so this one, well, that's just a conventional light bulb, so here
But
we are.
do you always want a sort of.
There is almost always a second light source. It's frequently just quite hard to pick out and identify or isolate. But it's almost always there. That it's just a matter of, what would you say? So if I'm lighting something, I'll probably do that in a more deliberate way. It's actually, it's something, thanks to photography really, artists have got much better at lighting things since the advent of photography and the sort of the requirements of film. Yeah, and so there's lots of things to use there. It's interesting as well, there's lots of, in portraiture, for example, having a camera and a lens allows you to look at something like portraiture in a different way. You can get right close up to somebody. You can sort of crop out the top of their head, and because it's of a moment, you can get a bit of an expression or a look in their eyes or something, and you can get some really interesting photographs which are partial bits of people's faces and stuff like that. And conventionally that would never ever have been done in a portrait. It would have been mad to do that. No one would have ever considered it. But in a photograph it works, and so that whole idea, that way of looking at things, has travelled over into painted portraiture, which is quite interesting. So now you can do a painting like that and no one bats an eyelid, whereas if you'd done that before the advent of photography, people would have thought you were a bit mad.
So do you think that with the sort of technology advancements of phones and cameras and things, it's where the computer systems that are within it are a lot more forgiving?
Yeah, massively. It's really democratized photography, and there's an understandable sort of reaction by professional photographers. There used to be this thing of, well, it almost used to be that if you put the work in to have the technical know-how, then that was a sort of I don't know what you'd call it. Hang on, we'll come up with the word in a minute. There was a gatekeeping element to the fact that, so if any old idiot picked up an SLR, then they wouldn't be able to get decent photos out of it, except by chance, until they'd got the hang of how it actually worked. Which could mean lots of different things, but they'd still have to have some familiarity with it on a technical level. So that became this thing of, and then suddenly there was this feeling among photographers that, well, if you just pressed a button and the machine did it all for you, then it didn't count. And there's something to be said for that. But at the same time, there's different ways of taking photos as well. But yeah, it's completely democratized it. But it's interesting. It's oversimplifying it, but there's kind of two, going back to the days where you had to have some technical knowledge of how the camera worked, which I think you still do if you really want to produce reliable results. But you would get, most photographers would have this idea of, how much light they needed to capture. So, what kind of shutter speed they wanted, what kind of ISO, what kind of film they'd use, the f-stop, so the size of the aperture, which would affect the depth of field, and all these different things. And they'd have to make their decisions based on the image they wanted. But if you could just splurge through rolls and rolls and rolls of film, you could rattle out that. Some photographers would go and take like 5 photos, or 3 or 4 photos, which kind of goes back to the early days where you had a plate and you had to expose it. And so there's all this setup and preparation. And then came the time where you could just buy rolls and rolls of film, just expose hundreds of them, make contact sheets, and just pick out the good ones. So especially if it's a person and they're moving or they're being expressive, so fashion photography and stuff like that, a lot of fashion photographers would get someone to prance around in front of the camera and they just snap, snap, snap. And you get little moments of a fleeting expression or the particular thing that had looked right. And then they'd pick those out and those would be the photos, you know. And anybody can do that now.
Well, I guess as well with the advent of digitalised cameras, you just sort of snap for
you could just take thousands and
hours.
thousands of photos and just pick out the good ones, which means the act of getting a good photo isn't, you know, isn't quite the same thing. But I think it's a choice, you know. I mean, you could say the same thing. Painters sort of let go of that representational thing a long time ago. And it became all about the choices you make. And I think that's something photographers have to deal with now. I mean, it's hard, it's tough if you've done. I was watching the thing about ILM the other day, the Industrial Light and Magic, the effects team that did Star Wars, the original Star Wars, and then countless other things since then, E.T. and loads of others, but it came into existence because of Star Wars, really. And there are all these effects people, and there was this moment, it really was just like a moment in the 90s, I guess, where it was Jurassic Park, pretty much, where suddenly the computers just took over. And there were these people who dedicated their life to these skills, who had this job, and then just suddenly it was just gone. Like that was it. Like all these workshops full of people building things and inventing things. It's just like, well, that's over, bang, done. And there's something really, really quite tragic about it. But at the same time, that's progress, you know, it happens all the time. But it doesn't change the fact, and what was interesting is that the people who had an understanding of what cinema needed, of what needed to be communicated, of what was sort of, you know, what the effects were meant to do, had the power to keep working in it. You know, even if they couldn't transfer over to using a computer, they were still useful in terms of knowing the computer wasn't doing anything that wouldn't have been done. You know, instead of building a giant rubber puppet dinosaur, they were building a virtual rubber puppet dinosaur, but it's still a rubber puppet. You've still got to make it move around. You've still got to give it some personality. You've still got to get the shots that make that film or that image look good. And so those skills didn't go away. They just, the tools changed. And I think the same is true of with image making. You know, if you truly understand image making, that's where the power is. And what tool you use is almost less important. Sorry, I'm blathering now. Now, you can't really see much of what's going on with these cubes now, but I'm figuring out some interesting things. And if you look at the subject matter, you can kind of, it's from a slightly different angle, but you can still see how there's lights which will go in here and here and here and here. So these are all these sort of shadows. There'll be a bit of light that goes across there, there'll be a bit that goes there, and there's these reflections that sit off them, which I can push around a little bit, so that shadow needs to match up with that.
Almost kind of looks at the moment as though it is an out of focus photo.
Yeah.
You can see the bowl in the background, but it's very, very blurred. And
yeah, so at the moment I'm figuring out where I will need some hard lines going in later on. Yeah, and the bowl is going to remain blurred. I'm not getting caught up in that. I'm promising myself that. He says, getting caught up in it.
But I'm just going to touch this bit.
Yeah, that's what keeps happening.
Did you ever, you brought up Jurassic Park, did you ever read much about things that were happening on set with Jurassic Park in terms of like the big dinosaurs? Because it was one of the first films where animatronic dinosaurs were made.
Well, no, the animatronic thing wasn't new at all. That's what was interesting. I mean, maybe the fact that they were dinosaurs.
The scale it was.
Yeah, but they weren't doing anything they hadn't done in Jaws. You know,
No,
it's just they're just taking it that bit more seriously, and it had to fit in with what was happening on the computers. But I know what you mean, though. There was sort of that was the interesting thing, is that they still needed rubber puppets, and those rubber puppets were still used for the close-ups.
Oh no, it wasn't so much that. It's that the like the big T-Rex that happens in the main kind of like scene where the T-Rex breaks out of its paddock.
Yeah.
They made a T-Rex that was that size, and then
I thought they just did the head.
No, it was the pretty much the whole thing.
Right.
And where they were filming in the rain, water was getting into the electronics, and so every so often there would be a movement that the T-Rex did that nobody had prescribed it to do.
Well, they hadn't planned it.
And so every so often it would just move of its own accord.
That's genuinely terrifying.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's still kind of astonishing if you watch that film now that that was a PG.
Oh gosh, yeah, there's a lot of gore in that.
And it wasn't just the gore; it was just the fact that it was so convincing.
Mm.
You know, there was actual dinosaurs eating people. You know, and it's a funny thing that if it was a cartoon with dinosaurs eating people and much worse, then it probably wouldn't be so bad. But it's the fact that it felt so convincing at the time. I haven't seen it in a while. It's hard to judge how well it's aged. I know some things, especially special effects wise, don't age well at all. Yeah. This is where I could easily be distracted by the top of the panel if I'm not careful. Okay, that'll do for that actually. Oh, nice little flick. Leave that. Okay. Before I get into too much detail, I'm going to get a bit of this yellow out. Last bit of the mixing white.
I remember going to the 25th anniversary of Jurassic Park at the cinema, because they were screening it in Yeovil.
Right.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Okay. Have I gone too yellow too soon?
Too yellow too soon. It's a yellow object, so why would you go too yellow too soon? Explain that comment.
There's a maximum yellow, and I want to build up to it. And although this looks quite dull on the palette, I can test it out actually. I can get a blob of yellow and put it on top. Oh yeah, that's a lot more yellow.
Yeah.
So I can go a lot further with it. I'm going to take that off and put it back here.
And is this didn't you say this is like quite a funky yellow, quite a special one?
Oh, it's just a good quality one, which makes a difference with yellows more than it does with other colours. So I'm using, I'm making it a bit more orange using alizarin crimson. So that's going to dull it down as well. Yes, this is suitably dull now.
I know quite a lot of people have that.
Yes, how I describe you.
Yeah.
Da-da, hooked into that one. Okay, so there's interesting little shadows. Pop that in, and then I want to go a little bit bluer.
Is it suitably dumb, or is it comfortably numb? That's a
Pink Floyd song.
yeah.
I don't know why you'd say that. I think that was about heroin addiction, wasn't it?
Probably. Oh, Jesse's having a chat.
There you are. So there's little bits of yellow turning up.
Jesse's had to bolt this evening.
Oh, well, it was nice of her to pop in.
Yeah. Saying that I think, well, we were talking about Jurassic Park, and she said one of my favourite films.
It's a classic.
Mm-hmm. And with the amazing Jeff Goldblum as well. He's an idol of mine.
Right. Very good jazz piano player.
Mm.
Yeah, I can remember seeing The Fly when it came out.
Yeah.
It was because I was still that was one I was still a kid, but there was this real fascination with it. There were all these stories like, you know, they had buckets in the cinema because people were throwing up and stuff like that, which I don't know. I don't think that was actually true, but it was that sort of film that gave rise to that sort of talk. Okay, that's right. That's the yellow wandering into the blue here. Anything else outside of that? Maybe a little bit there. Ooh. Okay, I'm going to clean the brush now. Give that a bit of a buff. Just soften it down a bit. Oh. Oh. I'll take the jacket off as well. I'm warming up now. I think I'm actually generating heat by concentrating. How's the focus on the camera?
That's good.
It looks blurry to me, but...
Which way?
Oh no, it's okay when you get close.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think that the more that you're adding to it, the less, or the more in focus it's becoming.
Right, yes. Okay, so I should have enough colours here as reference to actually mix the next ones with a certain amount of confidence. Part of that is going to be a fairly neutral grey. Which gets a little bit yellow in a few places, a bit more than that maybe. Very subtle. And a bit more purple in places, and a bit more blue in places. I'm going to go down to a slightly smaller brush. See if I can make this work. That's going to need a bit of that in there. It should tonally be similar to the background. Pop a bit in there as well. Definitely got to get darker around it. That should be lighter than what's around it. Oh, brush mixes. Same kind of thing in here. That's going to have a shadow on it. Oh, I've lost my place now. That's going to be lights. That doesn't know what it's doing. Yeah. Get some of these shapes in before I've gone into sort of particularly any kind of thick paint. Pop a bit in there. What's under here? I can get a bit lighter. Bit of that blue reflecting up. Probably a bit there. Right. So if I get towards the lights now. Make it a little bit yellower. Still got room for the bright lights, but what's that doing? Okay, same thing here. That's a bit steeper. Orange on the top. Ah. Yeah, that's where that would go. So when I come back with the blues, which I'm going to change a bit, they will have an effect on this. This is going to have to get pinker. So I've got a bit of that pink. Add it in slightly. So slabs of paint is all very well, but I also want a little bit of a little bit of sugar cubiness, which is going to involve getting a bit greener again. It's going to go in here. Is it going to be different enough? I guess so. It's also going to do a job for the reflections. They're starting to appear gradually, a little bit lighter at the edges, like that, and there. And here. Now all this has to line up or it won't make sense to the eye. That needs to be pinker. Again, add a bit into that. Ooh. Put a little bit of that in there. A little bit in here. Okay, let's get another medium-sized brush and go back to my blues with it. Should be a suitable amount darker than it was. Same thing here.
We are coming up to the 8 o'clock mark.
Oh right, I thought we were already there.
I always find it so interesting that, you know, you tonight, for instance, you picked a like block of sugar cubes, and they're white until you start looking at them properly.
Yeah.
And they are not just white. There's so many variables and different colours that are going on within it.
Yeah, and I'm still finding more as well. I mean, I don't even entirely know what colour they are yet. It's gradually revealing it to me.
Because with the way that the kind of the shadow or the reflection is of them, it's like you could almost turn the painting upside down and it would still, the sugar cubes would still actually be a look right.
I hope so. Okay, so I'm going to put some of these deeper shadows back in there. Some of these deep blues, brought a bit of red to put in there too. That's going to go all the way up to here. It's going to come all the way around the corner. Now, because the light source is so close, I've got my shadows going in two different directions, which is mildly confusing. These are going to have to get even darker. Put more red in there. Go back to my blue. Let's see what that does. The appropriate amount darker. Where else could that go in? Probably in here. What about in here? Yes. And under there. And in here. That's light. It's funny, isn't it? It's starting to turn up. So what else have I got? I've got this greyish colour which comes under there. Is that the right amount? Well, it is about the right amount. And there was that greener one as well, wasn't there? What's that doing? Doesn't know. Now it's just a matter of brightening this up, I think. This can get closer to that edge there. There's a slightly yellower edge. Is that too much too soon? I think it probably is. Or pinky yellow here. Oh, that's it. And this is where I can start to break the marks up a bit as well. Hopefully introduce some of that sugar cube-ness to it. I think I've messed that up. Trying to do too much detail too soon. Where else is it got that pinkiness on it? Here. There's little sparkles in bits as well. What else up here? It's a bit more orange. Is it? Not quite. A little bit yellower again. Ah, there we go. This one's got an interesting corner on it. Oh yeah, those sugar cubes, yep. I'm not 100% on it. That blue in the reflection should be enough to sort of pick up some of the light, and not too much. Yeah, something like that. Okay, this is interesting. I'm going to put some more red in here, just to give it a bit of that reflective quality. A bit more in here as well. Okay. Finding some things now. Yeah, we can use that for some of the shadow, especially around this back bit here. Okay, I can see, well, I can put some of that in here as well. And here. Again, go back to that redder version. There we go. That shadow there, that's going to be important. Once the highlights start coming in, that will make a difference as well. This still needs to be light in the background. So, all sorts of new interesting things happening there as well. So, here. that work? Yeah, that edge there. That top edge of this. Oh no, that's darker. Goodness, it's getting confusing now. I'm going to darken that edge. That needs an angle. Right, this needs to be steeper. And a paler blue behind. Oh, it's fun. There's all sorts of discoveries happening now. Yeah, it's very hard to make up your mind as to the tonal values here. Very tricky. Um, Yeah, soften that edge, bring a bit more colour over here. Okay, highlights, let's have a few in there, into here. I think this might be an early finish, this one.
Well, that's exciting.
Isn't it? Oh, I've swapped over the purpose of this brush at some point. I'm now doing highlights with it. Which I shouldn't have done really, because that's the other brush. I had a light in the dark and I can't even stick to them. Let's try that again. There we go. A bit pinker, but only a bit. Yeah, I'm over egging it with the sugar cubes. All right, now I can start turning the yellow up. And in certain places. In fact, I'm already seeing how it hardly gets to the bright yellow anywhere. This might look like very bright yellow when it's going on, but it's a long way off the real highlights. Uh-huh. A bit of reflection. This bit just get a bit brighter. Here, on the top of that. Hey, okay. Is that lemony enough?
It's definitely yellow.
That's a rhetorical question, really. Thanks for attempting to answer it.
I like all the techniques that are being used on this, and it's so subtle that only really you, I think, as the painter, maybe somebody else who's a seasoned painter would probably realise.
Well, I'm just reacting, so.
But no, I mean the you've actually managed to get texture on the sugar cubes with the way, like, with how you've applied the paint and the brush stroke that you used.
Yeah, I suppose you home in on that kind of thing, don't you? Right, I've got the cadmium red now. So I can make a much deeper orange just where it's needed, just in here. Which tonally will be darker, but in terms of chroma will be higher. I can go back into my red. Some of these shadows up here. And here. Undercut all of that. Okay. Bit grayer there. No, that should be greener. There we go. Let's take a step back, look at it. Rubbish. Okay, that's going to require a few reds in there. A few little yellow blobs on top. Let's break that up. That can be yellow enough now. Should be. There's a limit to how much I can fiddle with this. before I kind of lose everything I've done. Nice. Again, let's get a bit of this orange. I'm just touching it in the edge in some of those shadows, just soften them a little bit. Okay, where else can I see that? Let's have a bit there. Let's have a bit into these edges. Oh, I've just spotted something interesting. I don't know if this will be important, but I'm going to use the strong blue for it. It's just the top half of that gap. Yeah, because it cuts up the shadow. And use it again there. And here. And I don't want to overdo it, so I will stop there. Oops, another one. Lighten this slightly.
Still a big fan of that bowl. I know it's not a focal point at all,
No.
but it's...
It needs a few highlights on it though, but not really bright highlights, so they'll come in now. I'll start with the brightest, which is going to go here. Oh, is that going to do it? That'd be a bit wider actually. There we go. Get some paler blue on there as well. It's nice. There's a similar thing around here. Pull out the edge of that shadow. And while I've got some of that yellow down here, work a bit of that into the reflection. Like that. Little flash of it right in the middle of there. Still not happy with that lemon. I think I know what I need to do. Just got to go into stronger colour here. chuck a load of pure yellow on. Really try and build a shape for it. There you are, it's a bit softer now. Is that more like it? I feel like it is and isn't at the same time.
I think what's kind of interesting is where the accent light that you've got going on is pink. It's shining a really unnatural colour onto the lemon. So it's almost making it look bruised.
Yeah, I guess so. You know what I need to really do? So remembering what colours are where and what ones I used. This edge needs to move in. There we go. No, that's okay. A bit more of that dark in there. Bold's fine, leave it alone. Make that a bit more squat. You know what? I think that's probably done. No, not quite. There's a little highlight needs going on. I'm cleaning this this brush again. Well, I'm just using my two that I had. A few little bits there. That's got to be okay, isn't it? Ooh. I'm still seeing things, but a little bit of light just on top of that. This needs a clearer edge and a slightly larger face. Is that as sugar cube as it's going to get? Right here. So the light kind of travels through the sugar cubes a little bit. Yeah. I think it's okay. You don't need the little crumbs at the back here. A bit of that in. That's fine. I'm going to stop there, I think. I'm going to sign it in this violet colour. Ta-da. And yeah, I think that'll do. The only thing throwing me now is this. Should there be something in between this yellow and this? Oh no, I just spotted something and it needs addressing. I can't ignore it.
Fiddle time.
No, see there's this bit here and it's still the underneath showing through. And actually it needs to be a sort of a browny yellow with a bit of the blue in it. It just sort of creates a bridge between those two things. Yeah, the reflection isn't quite right, but I've sort of extended it. So that'll do. Yeah, I'm going to stop there. Oh, here we go. There's a thing you could do. You could introduce a new source.
Yep. Where's the mouse? There it is. Yep.
Okay, and the new. I don't know what you've opened there. Not a new scene, a new source. So yeah, it'd be one of those to basically duplicate. So, right, are you still in scenes? That's it. Okay, so yeah, in that window, you see at the bottom, there's a plus.
Mm-hmm.
Click that. New video capture device. That's the one.
What we're labeling this as.
Call it anything. And if we choose the phone camera, will it do okay?
Okay.
And choose the phone camera, and it will basically fill the whole screen with the phone camera, and then I can take it off and do a proper Mr. Smug. Ta-da! Right, there we go. So
there we go.
That's my view in front of me, and there's my palette. I hope that came out pretty well. And there's the painting. So if we get right up close, I'm seeing things wrong with it now, but there you go. Too late to be fussy, isn't it? Yeah, not a lot to it, but actually a really nice, simple little image.
It's amazing the amount of colours that have gone into the white sugar cubes.
Yeah, I'm seeing new things now. So, you know, I can do this one-handed.
I'm quite interested with the view that you've got there. You've gone a lot more yellow than what the lemon actually is showing on the sort of screen there.
Yeah, well, the camera is limited. I'm seeing some stuff here that I think I need to change. Go back to some lights.
Oh, excuse me.
If we go back to some of these blues, make it a bit bluer, see how much we can get away with. Yeah, so we can turn that up a little bit. That's probably unnecessary, wasn't it? But there you go. That's what I wanted to do.
You noticed it.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for joining us. There's Graham at the computer, and there's me. Hello. And yeah, we'll have something different next week. Who knows what? So if you're popping into the Beanshot Cafe tomorrow, have a look for this. And yeah, well, it'll be up for sale for some ridiculously low price. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. And we'll see you next week.
Excellent. Thank you very much.